This story isn't about a wedding. It's about grief, boundaries, and what happens when pain is allowed to rewrite reality. This is a case where everyone believes they're justified, and where the truth sits uncomfortably in the middle. 3 years ago, the narrator's younger sister, Jen, lost a pregnancy at 9 weeks. It wasn't far along, but it was far enough to be real. There were names discussed, plans imagined, a future quietly forming. Then it ended. The narrator remembers that time clearly. Jen withdrew. Her partner, Scott, tried to be present, but struggled. And the grief lingered longer than anyone expected. The narrator showed up as best she could. She listened. She supported. She didn't push. At the time, it felt like the right thing to do. Months later, Scott left. Jen explained it the same way to everyone. She said the miscarriage had broken them both, that neither of them could move past it, that grief had changed everything. The narrator believed her. But over time, something felt wrong. Jen and Scott had shared a close group of friends. After the breakup, none of them checked on Jen. Not a text, not a visit, nothing. That absence raised questions. Concerned, the narrator reached out to one of Jen's closest friends. She suggested a casual girls' night, just to make sure Jen wasn't isolated. That conversation changed everything. Scott hadn't left because of grief. Jen had cheated. When Scott confronted her, Jen blamed the miscarriage. That was when he ended the relationship. The narrator didn't confront Jen about this revelation. At the time, she believed reopening old wounds would help no one. She kept the information to herself. That decision would matter later. 9 months ago, the narrator got engaged. This was meant to be joyful, hopeful, a fresh chapter. Despite everything, she wanted her sister involved. She asked Jen to be her maid of honor. Jen accepted. At the engagement party, something shifted. When a friend arrived with their baby, Jen broke down. She cried openly. She couldn't recover. Conversations stopped. The entire room adjusted around her pain. The narrator didn't intervene. She told herself this was understandable, that this was the first major family milestone since the miscarriage. She assumed Jen was imagining what these moments might have been like for her. She chose compassion. After the engagement party, the pattern became clearer. Every wedding-related moment carried emotional weight. When they went to choose flowers, the narrator suggested baby blue roses. Jen froze. She insisted she had been carrying a boy. She became overwhelmed. They had to leave. The narrator changed the color scheme. She didn't argue. She believed flexibility was kindness. The dress shopping trip was different. Jen selected a maternity-style bridesmaid dress. She asked to try it on. At first, it didn't register as unusual. Then she stuffed a cushion under the dress. She stood there staring at herself. No one spoke. The room felt heavy. The narrator walked away. This wasn't a moment of sadness, it was something else. The narrator suggested counseling again. Jen refused. She insisted this was a normal stage of grief. The narrator didn't press further. But something had changed. Grief doesn't follow a schedule. It doesn't move in straight lines. And it doesn't look the same for everyone. But unresolved grief has a pattern. It seeks space, attention, control. And when left untreated, it often surfaces during other people's milestones. Despite the tension, Jen planned the hen party. The narrator was grateful, until she found out what Jen had done. Jen sent the guests a list of rules. No pregnancy talk, no children, no baby blue clothing. The narrator confronted her carefully. She reassured Jen that she cared, that she wanted her included. But she also set a boundary. If Jen wanted to impose rules on wedding events, she had to ask first. This wasn't punishment. It was containment. Then came the pregnancy announcement. One of the bridesmaids revealed she was expecting. She would be 7 months pregnant at the wedding. Without telling the narrator, Jen called her. She told her it would be best if she didn't attend. Jen said she needed to protect her peace. When the narrator found out, she lost control. This wasn't emotional discomfort anymore. This was interference. She accused Jen of using her miscarriage to control the wedding. She issued an ultimatum. One more demand, one more comment. Jen would be uninvited. Jen was removed as maid of honor. Jen told her own version of events. She said she had been removed from the wedding for grieving her baby. Friends and family began reaching out. They accused the narrator of cruelty, of abandoning her sister after a tragedy. Cornered and angry, the narrator defended herself. She revealed the truth about Jen's breakup with Scott. She clarified that Jen hadn't been removed for grief, but for uninviting a pregnant bridesmaid without permission. She now admits this may have gone too far. But in that moment, she felt erased. Grief can explain behavior, but it doesn't rewrite history. And when grief becomes the explanation for every action, it stops being a feeling and becomes a shield. The narrator didn't want to be seen as someone who abandoned her sister over a loss. Jen didn't want to be seen as someone who lost everything because of her choices. Both were protecting their identities. The wedding is approaching. The family is divided. Some believe the narrator lacked compassion. Others believe Jen weaponized her grief. The narrator is still angry, still uncertain, still wondering if she failed her sister, or if she simply refused to disappear. Before the verdict, who crossed the line here? Verdict: shared fault. Grief is valid, but grief does not grant control over other people's lives. Finding: Number 1, Jen crossed critical boundaries. Jen's pain is real, but repeatedly centering herself during wedding events and ultimately uninviting a pregnant bridesmaid crossed a clear line. That was not self-care. That was control. Finding number 2, boundaries were justified. The narrator showed patience. She adapted plans. She suggested counseling. She communicated limits. Removing Jen as maid of honor was not cruelty. It was containment. Finding number 3, retaliation escalated harm. Revealing the cheating shifted the conflict. It moved the situation from boundary enforcement to reputation damage. That didn't resolve the conflict. It hardened it. Final judgment. Jen weaponized unresolved grief. The narrator weaponized the truth. Both acted out of pain, not resolution. Grief deserves compassion. Boundaries deserve respect. When those collide, accountability still applies. That's the verdict. Case not closed. Subscribe for more.